Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. And today we're diving deep into the story of how to double the size of your business through an SBA-backed acquisition. My guest, Tristan Pelligrino, an agency entrepreneur who did exactly that. His journey offers valuable lessons for anyone looking to grow through M&A. We'll explore the highlights, the highs and the lows, the process of working with lenders, cultural challenges, and actionable strategies for integrating acquisitions successfully. So let's dive in. Thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
Now, your story is fun and it's going to take a little bit to unpack it. So, can you share how you went into this whole entrepreneurship business endeavor and what led to your first transaction that led us down this agency acquisition story?
Yeah, I started as an entrepreneur like on the side. I think today they call it like a side hustle, but I'm a little older, so we called it moonlighting back in the day. And you were working. The name of my first agency that I created was 522 Productions, and that's because we would work 9 to 5 and then freelance from 5 to 2 a.m. in the morning. And that's how I got started. I started really small. First project that we won was $300 project that we spent way too much time on for $300. But that's how you get started. And you just have to produce work out there. And you know, we didn't even know what we were creating at the time. It was a video production agency, and at that moment, YouTube was just getting off the ground. And so a lot of the work that we did was not only on the video production side and actually producing the video content, but it was also getting that content on the web, which involved a lot of Flash development. And so that's where I kind of came into the fold when I partnered up with a friend of mine from college. He was more on the documentary side and video production side, and I was more on the programming side. So we came together. We're able to get video out on the web for a lot of companies early on, and then we just grew from there. And I wasn't even full time at first. I was still a consultant at the time, working for like a large software companies, Oracle and IBM, and just implementing ERP systems, and then doing this work on the side to grow it to the point where I was able to exit that particular career as a consultant, jump in full time as an entrepreneur, running my own company. Then we grew that to the point where that video production company made it to the Inc. 5000. We grew to just under $3 million in revenue. And then we realized at that time the two owners had a different vision for where we wanted to go moving forward, and a lot of discussions took place. And ultimately, I ended up selling my portion of the company to my business partner, and I exited that first agency, and that's really was my first experience with a transaction. I wasn't on the acquisition side; I was actually selling that portion of the first agency that I created.
That's, can we go back to that for a moment? You were doing ERP implementation or tech development, and your side hustle was production. That's a real side hustle, Tristan. That's like
Yeah.
you have this 9 to 5 programming type job, and then you're doing the fun thing with a college buddy. When you made that jump to go full time, were you nervous about it? Was it like a relief? Was it exciting? Like, what was that?
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that was the fun thing on the side, and it truly was. I didn't think it was going to be a career or anything that I'd be able to support my family. It was more of an exercise that I was going through. I wanted to at least get something going, and my goal really at first was to just purely learn. How do you go out and start a company? How do you create a proposal and actually have someone sign it, and then also give you a check? And then you deliver something. Like, how does that process work? Because I was also in grad school at the time, and you really just want to apply the knowledge that you're getting in the classroom, and you want to be able to see how it works in the real world, and that's really what it was initially. What was an exercise? It's like how much income or side income can we create that is fun. It's different than what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, quite frankly, I was working with the federal government. So a lot of those projects would move at a snail's pace. And, we're working through requirements document for 6 months. On the flip side of that is a completely different universe where, I'm controlling as much as I can with our agency. I'm writing proposals as fast as I can, and people want to get started and they want to get video content out there. So it was like two completely different worlds, and it was really a fascinating time, as a young professional trying to navigate those two different things. But it was, like you said, Peter, a lot of fun.
Yeah. And to do it with someone you knew and then get to a certain size, get those entrepreneurial recognitions and rewards of being on the Inc. 5000. Before you share with us the entrepreneur journey, which was your next company, Motion, quickly double tap on that exit, because it's actually extremely common, right? You start a company with someone, many people don't think about what it's like to get out of that partnership when they start it. Was there anything that you gleaned from transitioning from being in a partnership to, exiting and starting your own thing that you would want to give as advice?
Yeah, a big thing when we started, we did have an agreement, an operating agreement. And when we created the LLC, it was a 50-50 partnership agreement. The one thing with a 50-50 agreement is there's no tiebreaker, obviously. So, everything is really a stalemate. And so the one thing that I did learn, which I rolled into the new agreement when I started the next agency, which was started after I exited this first one, is it's important to have a valuation model or a mechanism in place to say, okay, hey, based on these financials, the performance of your organization, here's how it's valued. And, you both really sign up for that calculation from the very beginning so that you always know the value of your agency as you're moving forward, both or however many partners that are in place. If you're at X million and you have this much profit, it's like, okay, well, we know at least privately what that valuation is. On the open market, it might be different, which is, of course, always in play. But at least there's a number that you're working with in your head, and that's a mistake that I made in the first agency that I started. We didn't have that model in place, and so when we did figure out that it was time to go our separate ways, we had to really, jockey for what that valuation was. We had to kind of figure it out during that negotiation process. Took a little bit of time. Wasn't the smoothest process either. It's two individuals that had really created something over, really a 10-year period, and means a lot to both people. And, both sides have a different way of valuing something. So it takes a little while to have reality set in before you figure out, okay, I see where this is starting to level out to, where do we go from here? And then you're trying to even figure out both sides. Because I was originally going to acquire, or I was going to buy out my partner, and then obviously the situation reversed itself, and I was the one that was bought out, and then I started something new from there.
It sounds like you got a lot of lessons learned in that probably helped you approach acquisitions moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing, Peter, is to have that as much clarity as possible up front. And that is, you see that in a lot of how-to guides, or the top 10 things that you should do when you create an agency or whatever. And it's, you'll see some notion around, when you create an agency in that initial agreement, you should always think about the exit. Even if you don't plan to exit, you should always think about that. And I do feel that is true. Uh, you just never know what's going to happen down the line. Someone just might want to exit the business for some reason. It might be personal reason, health reasons. There's just a wide range of reasons someone just will not want to continue to working for that particular entity for an indefinite period of time. And so you have to have some way to at least start those discussions, so that you can come to an agreement where, both sides can really move on from there.
Yeah. So you come up with an agreement on how you're going to value the business, your 50-50 partners. You structure a deal. It's a transition of control and ownership of the business. You are freed. And the first thing you do is, time to start something from scratch. What did you start from scratch? And then how long did it take before that itch of saying, hey, there's another way to do this kicked in?
Yeah. So the exit that I had, wasn't enough to retire. Let's be honest there, Peter. I got enough runway to basically start something else, brand new, which is really the goal. That the size of the company and where we were at the time, no matter what we did, even if we would have sold the entire entity, we're not going to retire at that point in time. So there had to be something else that was in play. And so I just really went back to what I felt I did best, which was creating video content for business. The previous agency that we had, we really offered services to a wide range of organizations. I mean, we were kind of spread out all over the place, all kinds of industries. We were just creating video for everyone, essentially. So I wanted to niche down a little bit. I wanted to create essentially marketing video content for organizations, mostly technology companies. We did work with nonprofits as well. But that's what I did right away. So it's like, I had to go to something that I knew, because I did want to replace the income that I had. I had enough runway to get started, but I had a family at the time. I had 3 kids, and you have a mortgage payment, and I was used to a certain lifestyle. You have an agency, it's almost $3 million in revenue. You're making a good income, and I had to replace that. So I had to get started quickly. I had to hustle, and get back at it again. And so, the first agency that agency that I created, we got to $1 million in revenue that first year. I mean, we came out of the gates really, really quickly. And I realized, though, that I was just on this same hamster wheel again. It was project oriented revenue. Every month when you wake up, if it's September 30th and you wake up on October 1st, your revenue is essentially zero, and you have to go out and win a bunch of new contracts again. And so there's no recurring deals in place. And we just got to a point where it's like there has to be a better way. We need recurring revenue. And so that's when we started to really kick around the idea of acquisitions, even then at that point in time, and in even other business models as well. And so there was a lot that was going on in our head at that time.
Now, kicking around acquisitions, that's not a light thing to kick around. What year was this? And what was inspiring you to think about acquisitions at the time?
Yeah, so I was always interested in acquisitions. Excuse me. And Peter, when we were talking in a previous conversation, I was trying to remember like what was the book or what was the podcast that I caught on to, but I can't remember what it was. But I did just have this itch to acquire an organization, and take something that already had some momentum and improve it, and then grow it from there, because it just seemed like a very logical way to get a step ahead. Because at this point in time, I had created an agency from zero, as a recent grad, and I had started something brand new again 10 years later. And I knew, excuse me, and I knew what that felt like. Starting from zero is hard. It is painful. There's so much that you have to go through that's you really can't control. There's just some things that you have to go through. Trying to figure out how you're going to go to market with a brand new entity, brand new brand that's in place. People don't know you. You're going to go out and spend a lot of money in advertising to get some of those initial customers. You're going to do outreach. There's so many things that to just get those early customers, and it just takes time. There's no button that you can press for that to happen. And that's why, I started to really consider acquisitions at that point in time. We were about a year out from that new agency. And I was exploring that in greater detail. And we had some conversations at the time, but we still didn't really get that underway. We couldn't find the acquisition that was a good fit. Didn't really know how financing worked. And so there was a period of time that we were looking for acquisitions, but they just didn't work out. And so what we ended up doing was we kept pivoting Motion to really a business model that was recurring. And we pivoted Motion from a video production project-based organization. We went to a content marketing agency. So where, we're producing content on a recurring basis, which involved more than just video. It was blog posts, ebook content, white papers, etc. And that went okay. We saw some traction there, but we weren't differentiated enough in the marketplace. So we were still trying to figure out, all right, so who are we and who do we serve? And we eventually created a podcast called Tech Qualified. And the purpose of the podcast was just to get to know our customers better. And very much what you're doing here, Peter. You're getting to know the market better, talking with agency owners. That's exactly what we did. We talked with heads of marketing at tech companies, and we realized, wow, this is so powerful. It's working well for us, and we're figuring out that we could produce this type of thing for the customers that we're talking to. So we then productized podcasting at that time. This is right before COVID, and it worked really well. So then once COVID happened, remote recording came on the scene. And so we're recording Zoom here with video content, but at the same time we had Squadcast that was brand new on the scene, that was traditionally just audio content, but then they released a video component. Riverside was brand new at the time. And so the remote recording phase really kicked in at the same time that we were starting to produce podcasts. And that's what allowed Motion to grow to the point where we had enough traction and we were profitable to where it felt comfortable to actually go out and do an acquisition. And that's where we turned to the SBA for a financing source.
That's great. So you got to $1 million in revenue very quickly. You were still dancing around product market fit, project, the feast and famine, built a structure, kind of found who you were, right? The clothes started to fit, and you said, oh, now we know who we are, and now we have a proposal and economic and contract model that is reoccurring. So we built security within the business. We're at a stable place, but you were much bigger in revenue, right? At the time when you said, now it's time to go buy and how can we finance this? You were, north of 7-figure. You're about $1 million something, right?
Yeah, it was about 1.3 when we looked.
Well, 1.3 MRR is very different than 1.3 project.
Exactly. And that's what so the 1 million, this annual. So 1 million in revenue project based is completely different than when you have MRR in place and you're at 1.3. And it took us a while to get there. So we came out of the gates at 1 million. It was painful. Sometimes we had like almost nothing in the bank account because we got receivables that are coming in and we're spending money going out on new projects. And it's a constant cash flow balancing act. Yeah. And we even dipped to revenue, went down to like 600, 500. And we were even doing some other consulting work on the side as we shifted the business model, because it's not like something you turn on and off overnight. You still have to have those projects come in, but we were changing the messaging on the website. So we were selling to customers that we had sold to before that were coming back for other projects. They knew us for a certain thing, but then, we're marketing ourselves in a different way externally to get new customers. So it's almost like in many ways we were operating two businesses as we were shifting the model. And there was one year where, we had video projects that were like 90%. And then I think it was 2 years later where video projects were like 5%. And then 95% of the revenue was recurring on a monthly basis. And it took about 2 years to make that shift. And that's when we were at a point where, hey, we do have some predictability here. We can plan, which is insane. We were, and even at my previous agency, planning was really just a guess, because you really had no idea. You could have a $400,000 project come in next month and close, and there was just no way to plan for it. You couldn't go out and hire resources. You couldn't put mobilize your team in a different way. There's just no way to plan for it. And so this gave us that I guess comforting feeling that, hey, we know that there's going to be a certain amount of income coming in, and we can now take a crack at acquisition, and we can use the SBA as a mechanism for financing. And hey, going after that personal guarantee and putting that in place isn't something as scary as what it would have been probably a couple of years earlier.
Indeed. Uh, so what I hear you saying, sage advice, is get to the business to a point where at least you feel stable enough to think about the big move. It's hard to do the big move if you are stressed, concerned, or there's instability in the business, which is very important. And then you said the next thing, which is take advantage of something we have in the United States that is not available elsewhere. The SBA program 7A to go finance an acquisition. So you became aware of it. A mutual contact, Matthias, he's who you worked with. What did that whole process look like to go get a loan to buy a business?
Yeah, we there were a couple moving parts there. Yeah, to your point, Peter, the business got so stable that it was really only me and my business partner that were doing a lot of the work, and we were like 1.3 million. And it was almost like it was scary that that's all that we could do. We were at this point where are we going to bring on other employees to run the business, or it was really just us and global resources, some freelancers, and we had great income. But it's like, all right, so we're going to do this forever. And that's where I started to get very unstable, because I'm not comfortable in that setting. I'm like, well, this can't be all that it is. I want something bigger and better. Always did. That's kind of what led to the first exit, where I just wasn't satisfied. And I think in many ways, Peter, a lot of the entrepreneurs that you talk to, there's probably always that piece, that element that drives them to the next thing, no matter what it is. And that's, me and my business partner have a lot in common that way. We as soon as you get comfortable, you get very uncomfortable, and that's what happened. And so that's when we did look to acquiring another agency. And the reason we did that is because we had so much work that was put into place to find that product market fit, and to find that niche, that was creating a predictable pipeline, and that we were known for a certain thing. And we didn't want to grow, through expanding that type of customer base. We didn't want to introduce new services. We felt that would really muddy up the messaging that we had in place. So that's why it's like, all right, this is a good time. Let's go out and acquire, and let's tap into one of a few options that we had. Was either we're going to bolt on another podcast agency, just expand the customer base that we have, get some more efficiencies there, or we'll look to other services that we could offer to the same customer base. And so initially we had a couple of options available to us. And so we did a couple things. We hired Capital A, which helped us on the buy side. They were a buy side broker, and that's something that we did that I felt was very it was a good decision at that point in time. We were very serious about an acquisition, and we could have gone on the hunt ourselves, but we said, hey, we want to actually make this happen. Let's pay someone that knows how to do this, knows how to find opportunities in the market, that works specifically with agencies, because that we know that's the type of business we're going after. We're not going after HVAC companies or accounting firms. We want marketing agencies.
Yeah,
And
you're not
so
browsing biz buy sell and finding a lot of agencies.
No, not at all. And the ones that you find there, who knows, at what stage they're in, and they're just limited opportunities there. And we believed, and probably what you see a lot, Peter, too, is there are a lot of great deals that are available uh, with agencies that aren't even on the market yet. They're thinking about selling, they're preparing for a sell, and it's just like that. Those are the options that you're looking for. And so we hired Capital A to make that happen. And at the
Shout
same
out to
time,
Andy Day, just to shout him out by name.
yes,
Andy Day over at Capital A.
um, great person, great resource. I can't recommend them enough, especially for that first acquisition that you're looking to do. So we had a lot of conversations. They did exactly what we were hoping for. At the time, we didn't really know exactly what we were looking for.
Hmm.
We were looking at podcast agencies, and then they were pulling in some other services that would align well with what we were doing now. Some other content related agencies. We did look at some web design and dev companies at the time, and then also some full service marketing agencies, which we thought that was interesting as well. Could we find an agency that could serve as the umbrella for a holding company? And so there were a couple of things we were juggling there, and we were fortunate enough to find an agency called New North that wasn't even listed by their broker yet, but because Capital A got us in there earlier, they were preparing for a sale, and we had some really good conversations. And this was in probably the first 2 to 3 months of working with Capital A, and then we thought it was a good opportunity. So we had a lot of deeper conversations with the owner, and one thing leads to another. I'm reaching out to Matthias, who's a broker. So he basically tees you up with different lenders that specialize in SBA financing. And so he'll help you take a deal that has certain parameters, and then he'll then translate that to some lenders that he feels would be a good fit. Um, Not all SBA lenders would work with a cash flow based agency. A lot of SBA lenders need additional collateral in place, whether it's real estate or inventory, some other tangible assets. Essentially, when you're buying an agency, it's a cash business. It's a cash flowing business, and that's what you're buying essentially.
And your people leave on Friday, and now with post COVID, they log off, and you
Yeah,
hope they log back on Monday. And so I want to highlight two things you did there. So you had a business partner, you were in the business, you were working, you were making money, you were doing all the work, so you got all the profits, and you had a choice. You had a choice to either delegate, hire, basically add new roles and responsibilities to you and your partner in order for you to grow, or shortcut that and acquire something that already was mature, already had revenue, already had team. So you didn't have to spend the years going from where you are as an individual and plug and play. Voila, you're there. You're overnight there. And then the second thing you did, which is huge, you didn't even really emphasize it. It was the who, not how. You worked with someone to help you find an opportunity, and then you worked with someone to help you find a lender. Man, does that speed everything up.
it does. It does. And it really just comes from being resourceful. I like Matthias is I found him on Twitter. He's very vocal on Twitter, he's very active. This is one
Pioneer
of
Capital. So yeah, Pioneer Capital, Matthias Smith over there. He's been a huge contributor to the ETA community and helping entrepreneurs get through their first acquisition and getting the lending in place for it. So when did you contact him? Before you had the target or after?
I trying to think. I had actually worked with Matthias. I was going to buy an accounting firm. This is a whole other podcast, Peter. I was looking at an accounting firm that we could not finance because we got the tax returns back, and just didn't pencil out. The income was different than what was on the P&L
Which is
as far
always
as the
which is
tax.
always interesting with an accounting firm. Uh,
Yeah, so I
that's
I
a
did
red
not
flag.
I did not go through with that opportunity. It was under LOI and everything, but I learned a lot there. But anyway, that's a whole different story. But so, which led to me definitely going for an agency. And so when the next opportunity came up, I had already talked with Matthias quite a bit anyway. And, he's basically like, when you have another deal that comes on, talk to me before LOI. Let's see. And that's the adjustment that I did make with New North. Hey, let's see the financials. Let's make sure the tax returns jive with the P&L that's in QuickBooks. Then once that happens, let's see how the add backs are put in place. Are they acceptable, for a lender? And based on that, can we get to the purchase price that they're looking for? And then, the debt service coverage ratio, which is probably something you talk about a lot on this podcast. Is that suitable enough, where a lender is going to be comfortable there? And does it pencil out is kind of like the term that's often used. And so I went through that process with Matthias. I had my own model. I shared the data with him, and then he's working with some lenders. And so we basically had like a pre-approval from a lender that we attached to our LOI, so that when we sent it to the seller, the owner at the time, it's like, hey, we've already done some homework with SBA lenders. We're very confident that we would get this deal approved based on all the information that's been reported. And so that just makes the LOI stronger at that point in time. It's not like you're just flying around LOIs that have no commitment, and then people waste their time. So that's something that we worked with Matthias before, actually having the LOI in place.
Well, you found an opportunity. You got some preliminary financials. You were in contact with Matthias and said, hey, I have this company I would like to potentially evaluate doing a transaction with. He said, fantastic, let's circulate it. How many term sheets did you get? Or did you have a preferred lender right away for it?
Yeah, we had one preferred lender. There were some other backups, but it was basically like, hey, here's a deal that I feel is probably the best one based on, what I've seen. And so that's what we had in place. And so we didn't disclose who the bank was in the LOI, but we basically said, it was a top 15 SBA lender, already has a pre-approval in place, and that's what we attached to the LOI. And then as soon as the LOI was signed, that's when we did get an official term sheet and actually, put in a deposit with the lender and go down that path.
Yeah, that's great. Without getting into the specific numbers, what was the composition of the offer? Like, what did it look like?
Yeah, so it was in seven figures. So the portion, trying to think, seller's note was definitely a piece of it. And then SBA finance, I think 80, seller's note was 20. I mean, the whole thing, 100% of it was financed. And so that's the one unique thing about when you have an agency, or really anything that's in like the same, what is it,
Tax, yeah, the tax code.
NAICS code or whatever. If you're in that same industry, then you can actually go out and finance 100% in something called an expansion loan, which was essentially what we were doing. We were in marketing services, and we were looking for another agency that was doing marketing services as well, and we were expanding based on what we were doing, and that's was another key advantage to staying within that industry versus going and acquiring an accounting firm, which would not have classified there.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is the lesson learned is you had a platform, you had an anchor that was in the industry you wanted to buy into. So bolt on, tuck in, add on, all the ways that we describe it. You were able to go to a lender and say, really, I want an expansion loan that's favorable to add on this cash flow. And because I'm in the same industry, I know what to do with this business. So you can trust me as an operator. There's some components on it. SBA has favorable amortization on that loan. You have a 10-year note. And they ask you for a personal guarantee and some things about, minimizing their risk, right? A lender's job is to mitigate risk. and you checked all those boxes. It must be really good for that other business, which was how much in revenue?
They were at 1.6, I think, 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in there.
So combined, you're 2.8 million in revenue. You go from a two-person operation with contractors to do the work, recurring revenue, to how many people?
I think there were 12 to 14 full-time employees at
And
that, plus another, group
how
of
long?
freelancers and stuff.
How long did it take to close?
So we started once the LOI was signed. I would say 3 months is where it landed. Yeah.
So LOI signed to close so 90 days, and then tack on the search, so another 2.5 months ish range. So
Yeah.
in a less than 6 months, when you turned on that, we're going to grow through acquisitions, you doubled your company. You brought in a full team of people who knew how to do the jobs you needed done because they were already doing them. It seems like a magic trick when people hear it stated in the world. What was your takeaway? And it wasn't that easy, of sure, but like what was your takeaway from going through that one experience and then bring it down to the challenges? What was hard during that process?
The key takeaway, Peter, was let's do it again. That was our key takeaway. But we actually more than doubled. So we bought an agency who was a little larger than what we were, which is I don't know how common that is, but we were comfortable. The one thing that was good is like I had been an owner of an agency that was just under 3 million, so I knew what it felt like if it was combined. I knew what that revenue number felt like from a resource standpoint, cash flow, et cetera. And so I guess maybe that was an advantage for us. It wasn't as scary because me and my business partner were actually working in the previous agency when it was about that size. It was like we're just kind of accelerating how to get to where we were before so that we can get to the next step. There were definitely some challenges though. It wasn't an easy button like you mentioned. One of the things that I did personally was I went through the due diligence for the most part myself. So the quality of earnings, really taking a deep dive into the financials of the target was all on my shoulders. And so just a lot of work to go through that. I have an MBA, I have a background. I implemented ERP systems for the federal government. I saw billions of dollars go through accounting systems, but there's just something about going through the books of an agency that you're buying that's you don't really have a process for it, and so you're trying to go through. You're building your own process as you're doing it, and so there was just a lot of time spent in that area. I was able to do it because we just had some time with the agency that we had. We were we weren't working full 40 hours, so I did have some time to spend in that area, and that's so I felt like I could do it. Moving forward, won't do it that way. We will hire somebody to do the quality of earnings, get that third party perspective on the financials, just to make sure we do have proper due diligence there. So that's one lesson learned for sure. The other piece was a culture fit. Motion, the agency that we were running, the podcast agency, had switched to a fully remote workforce. We actually went through that transition before COVID. But the agency that we were acquiring, New North, was a local agency. They had an office location, and it was something we probably underestimated how those two cultures would come together. And that's
Did you
something that
did you go on site before closing the deal and do on-site due diligence? What'd that look like?
we did. Yeah, we went twice. We actually, yeah, we went through the office. We weren't disclosed as these guys are buying our agency, but it was like, hey, we're having a meeting. We took a tour of the office actually before a lot of the employees came in one day. So, but then once we came out of the meeting, it was just, like, hey, we just had a meeting. And then we went up again and met with the seller, but we did that offsite at like a WeWork location or something. And then we met another like senior leader in the organization that was aware of the to sell the agency. So at that
Yeah.
time, we went out to lunch and had a lot of those conversations.
Was it fun? Were you
It,
having fun?
oh yeah, it
Yeah.
was fun because at that time you're really starting to dig into how does this agency work? Who are the players involved? What are the clients? How are we servicing those clients? Um, the other thing too is you're really excited about is trying to find opportunities to grow, and it's not all always top line revenue. We were finding inefficiencies in the agency, and a lot of people feel like that they need to buy an agency that's a well-oiled machine. I kind of look at it a little differently, where I want something that has some fat in it that I can make a little bit more efficient. And there were definitely some areas that we felt that we could optimize, and there were some almost ways that we could pay for the loan pretty easily just by making a few adjustments that we knew about, and it just made that decision very uh, more comforting, I think, overall.
Now, was there a particular time when you realized the cultural aspects of the deal are now more important than the financing aspects in some degree?
Yeah, we didn't realize that until after we closed. You actually get in, start working with folks, and you find out that long term, some of these folks aren't going to work out. A big thing that we do now. Are you familiar with disc assessments
Yeah,
and all
it's
of that?
one of the best practices we say is do disc assessments prior to close. We have a contact who goes in and does it as a third party, so it doesn't seem strange, and facilitates it. So it's not us, but it is us. Same thing with client interviews. And then do assessments on the owners and managers, and then do a management fit assessment between the new direct reports of the people in the organizations to see if they clash. It's critical.
Uh, yeah, so that's a mistake that I made for sure. We did not do that. We will be doing that moving forward. We do that with employees now before we hire them. We make sure that we understand the makeup of their disc profile, because for certain roles in the organization, for instance, our strategist, high D, that they
Yeah.
really need to be in that spot. If you're not, then you really struggle, especially how we run the company. And that's what we found out, as we had a couple of very senior folks involved in the organization that just weren't really in tune with how we were moving forward, with how we
Yeah.
were managing client relationships, and just how we were reporting to clients. And um, you know we're just all about like really being proactive always, versus some agencies you'll see that are a little bit like, you'll toss something over the fence and, hey, let us know when you have some feedback, versus like, hey, I need this feedback because we got to move on to the next thing, because
Yeah.
otherwise we're not going to deliver for you. So it's a different mentality there.
So what you just described, if someone's not done an acquisition before, can seem scary, like cultural misalignment. You got a loan for this business. It sounds like it's heading in a terrible direction. Tristan, correct that false assumption by the listener. Uh, what was the outcome of all of that disruption, and what's your barometer? What's the measure of the current situation? Because you're going to do another deal again.
Yeah. So despite all the challenges that you have, a lot of our assumptions were correct, and that you know there was some opportunities to really optimize a lot of things in that agency. And the one thing that we did do is we did jump in. So me and my business partner did kind of shift our focus from the podcast agency. So we backfilled some of that work that was highly productized, and so it was stable, which goes back to the earlier part of the conversation. And so that we were able to turn our focus to developing really SOPs for this new agency, which that was an opportunity we saw. I think agencies in that $1 to $2 million range, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. People are doing good work, but it's not repeatable necessarily. And the SOPs aren't in place to grow, and they're not in place for predictable performance. And so we jumped in and said, all right, we need to like reconstruct how we're delivering everything. So like, what does a deliverable look like? What does a strategy document look like. We saw like some folks are kind of doing their own things, and depending on how they had worked in the past. There's senior folks that kind of have their own way of doing things, and we had to like reel that in and say, no, there's a new north way of doing things. We need to build it that way. And so we just started to build within and really standardize all the deliverables that were going out to clients. And so once we did that work, we were able to then settle in on the types of folks that are good fits to be a strategist, be that client facing role. And so we just had to hire new people. And then it's not like it was a complete turnover at one time. We just found opportunities where folks weren't a good fit. We had to hire some people to come in and that were a much better cultural fit. And, we're a year and a half later, we've really turned over just about everyone, but we have a completely different outlook in how we're servicing clients. And wasn't easy, but it was a lot of fun to do. And that's why I think we've learned a lot. But for the next one, there are some definite things we'll do beforehand. Like you mentioned, Peter, a disc assessment and making sure we know what we're dealing with before, going in there.
Yeah.
But also just being comfortable that those challenges, it's essentially what
It's normal.
yeah, it's the upside, right?
Yeah.
You want to, I think it's just about recognizing what those challenges are so that you know what you're going to be facing versus, signing LOI, doing the deal, and then kind of uncovering things in that first quarter that, you don't want to be blindsided. You just want to know the work that you're getting into.
No, that's the upside. Like all acquisitions are messy. And if like Jim wrote, it's a dirty job. It's a dirty job. It's a messy job. It's going to require you to get your hands in, fix it, change over people, adjust. But it was accretive. Now you more than doubled the company in a span of 6 months. What else could you do in a business other than maybe get one big whale or put all your energy in closing deals and not worry about how they're fulfilled? Really, there's very little you can do that could do that every single year. And you talked about your lesson as you're going to do it again. So for the listener, right, you've done it. You've also done another one recently too, creative. What's your recommendation for yourself to go back in time and say, hey, we should have done this year one potentially, or could have done it. We could have started motion through an acquisition. Why is M&A now, growing through M&A, the thing that you should be doing?
I think it's really to your point where you can start from zero if you want. There's a lot of there's a lot of honor in that, but also I think once you've done that a couple times, I mean, I've started from zero multiple times. It's incredibly hard, and no matter how fast you think you can get there, it's going to be a little slower than what you imagine, unless you have
that 5-year plan that takes 15 years.
Yeah, unless you have some influx of capital, but then also like agencies aren't going to get an influx of capital when you're starting from zero. There's no reason for it. There's no IP essentially other than what's attached to the owners, but it's like it just doesn't make sense, financial sense. You need to have some traction in the market with a certain group of customers. You need to have predictable delivery. You need to demonstrate that you're profitable. So all these things need to be in place. And if you go out and acquire something, it already exists. And so it's just just to your point, Peter, there's really no other way to do it other than through acquisitions. I mean, because your options, and we've talked about this at a leadership level, to get where we want to go, our options are to pour a bunch of money into marketing and advertising, but then it doesn't solve the back end where you also need to hire. You also need to develop new, procedures in order to make sure that you're delivering on that new work. And it's just very difficult to balance. Whereas if you acquire an entity that is running, the engine's in place, you're fine tuning, you're optimizing from there. And it's just like two different sides of the coin. I just don't really see any other way to get where we want to go without, going the acquisition route.
You described this transformation journey of the business that's going to need M&A. How has doing acquisitions, doing deals changed you as a leader and your long-term vision for yourself?
Acquisitions show there's light at the end of the tunnel. Basically, that the big, hairy, audacious goal that we set out for ourselves is achievable. And it's like, all right, if we do want to reach this revenue and profit level, um, we can either grow 20, 30% for X amount of years, or we can go down this route and actually achieve this number. It's just really more about reality. And I've realized that, we just need to have a bigger commitment to the acquisition piece of it. We kind of, it's something with the New North agency, and it's something that we did to really grow initially, but it's like, hey, this is something that we probably need to repeat, and we need to have more of a concerted effort around. And it's something that I'm dedicating much more time to. And I run marketing for the most part for our agencies, but it's like, if I even put all my effort into marketing our agencies, 20, 30, 40% growth is incredible for agencies. Or I can also work on acquisitions, and we can 2x, 3x, down the road. So, if you take those two different equations, what makes the most sense?
The
So,
highest and best use of Tristan's time
yeah.
is pretty clear. Now, I want to kind of bookend the story with you're not done. And we talked through traditional financing, SBA. You've now expanded into creative financing. So just a quick lesson on a smaller deal, because it's useful to see that there's many, dozens, hundreds of ways to do deals of all shapes and sizes. What was your last deal, and how did that now open your mind to, potential other deals you can do?
Yeah, I think for deals that involve SBA financing, you definitely want, at least from my perspective, recurring revenue for sure. I'm probably not going to go out and put a personal guarantee on something that's highly project oriented, especially if you're above seven figures. You want that predictable revenue in place. You want solid past performance. I don't even want huge growth. I want like 10, 15, 20% growth max. I want to see that it's able. Then I can feel comfortable that, hey, that there's folks that are coming back to this agency that, they've performed well over a period of time. That's what I'm looking at for SBA financing. On the flip side, there are agencies out there that might even be smaller. This is how I look at it, of creative financing, probably for smaller end deals that you kind of stumble into just through your network and having conversations out in the market. You can find agency operators, owners that have reached a plateau, and they just don't even understand how to get to the next phase. So you might, an agency we had was sub $1 million in revenue. Um, you know, owner had really performed well for a period of time, but the growth to get, the 2, 3x, it might not even be something that they're striving for. They basically created like a really good job for themselves. But it's like, now what's next? I kind of did this thing. I I know it's valuable, but I don't know how to grow it to the point where, I can exit and maybe do something else. I don't want to just wind it down because it does have value. So there are opportunities in the market where you can do creative financing, where, you can roll equity back into a new entity that you create. So if you buy out this particular agency, you can offer, 10, 20% equity to that previous owner as a piece of the purchase price. What we did, we didn't fold that in, but what we did was really cash and a seller's note. And that's really, and then we offered a job, essentially, compensation to work in a different role within our organization. So that's something that worked to get that deal done. And it was really, that was something that was more a cost for us. So, it was a firm that specialized in written content. And so we were actually a vendor of that firm several years ago. We had talked about acquisition. So it's something that just came about, 2, 3 years later. where we're like, okay, let's actually make this deal happen. And so that's another thing, if you look at your P&L, look at your expenses, what are you spending a lot of money on, either from a freelance perspective or, other third parties. Can you acquire any of those agencies and actually, own that piece of the expense side of the equation? And that's what we did in that case.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, there's tens of thousands of small accidental agency owners who are at that ceiling. Tristan, this has been extremely valuable for anyone who's listening. If someone has questions, you're a pretty open guy. You responded to my outreach after Matthias introduced us. How can someone get a hold of you? What's the best means?
Yeah, I think find me on LinkedIn. I believe I'm the only Tristan Pelligrino that's out there on LinkedIn. And other than that, you can reach me at marketersinDemand.com. Just fill out a contact form or reach us at info@marketersinDemand.com, and I'll get back to you.
Wonderful. Appreciate you, Tristan. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Tristan, for joining us today on Agency Acquisitions and Exits. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and YouTube. We regularly share stories from industry experts, people just like you who have successfully bought or have sold their agencies. If you or someone you know has a great acquisition story, reach out. We love to feature you. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Stay safe.